Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Jim Seymour, and I'm your teacher for this coming summer Approaches to Literature class at Husson, and welcome. I'm really looking forward to everything that lies ahead in terms of the stories, in terms of the sharing, in terms of seeing your progress as the summer moves on. And it's a pleasure to be here. I want to cover a number of different things in this first lecture, mostly the introductions. I want you to know a little about me, and hopefully I'll get to know a little about you as the next several weeks unfold. You may have understood from my previous announcements that I'm involved in the theater, and I just did a show, and that's one of the reasons I'm sort of late getting up here. But that will explain one of the reasons we're going to be reading 3 plays over the course of the summer. I think you'll love them all. I've been a theater director, I've been a college professor, and for a long time I was an actor in New York. And I've lived here in Maine now for 6 years, and I've been coming here all my life, but I'm actually here to stay, and thankful for it. A couple of things in terms of procedures. We'll be checking in with each other weekly, if not daily. I've divided the semester into 3 separate parts, as if you were taking a regular course on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday basis. And every one of those days, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, there will be an assignment due, as you can tell from the syllabus if you've checked it out already. It's very important that you get those assignments accomplished on a timely basis, because as the syllabus explains, if you're only minutes late, I have to take 10% off. And let me tell you, it's not wise to get behind. At a certain point, you're going to feel overwhelmed. But hopefully, this is going to allow you time to enjoy your summer, but it's also going to require you to put a good amount of time each week into the readings, more than once probably. These are short stories, but as I will talk a little bit about today, short stories are short, but they're not necessarily not complex. And but you, as the textbook indicates, know a whole lot more about stories than you probably know yourself. So I think you're going to catch on pretty quickly. So you want to get your work done on time. That's going to require the work and the reading. I would say a minimum of 4 hours a week, and I'm able to track the number of hours you are online, and that's what I'm going to be looking for. An average of 4 to 5 hours a week as you complete your essay assignments. At some point, we will be doing some revising, and you will be putting some of your thoughts together into a longer essay, perhaps one towards the middle of the semester and then one for a final. But we'll get to that when time comes. Now, in terms of the texts that are needed, there is, of course, this baby right here, the stories. And you can get that at the library. I'm sure you can also get the Seagull stories online as well. And this is the important one to have right away. As time goes on, I'll be right back. It's right here. You're also going to be needing the Seagull book on plays. Now that one's not as important to get immediately, so maybe if you want to get this one online. But we're going to be needing it in the matter of 3 or 4 weeks. So those are the 2 books you need, and of course I need not remind you that you're also going to need the writer's resource, because we do citation work in this class, as most of you, I hope, have experience with in your 123, 124 classes, or any of the composition classes that you may have taken elsewhere. So it's very important that we understand the importance of sources, not just in argumentative essays, but for literary essays as well. because a lot of the ideas that you're going to discover are ideas that have been shared by other literary experts, critics, teachers who add to the conversation. And this is all about a conversation. It's a conversation we're going to have, but it's an ongoing conversation between other readers and other writers about these classic stories. There'll probably be 1 to 2 lectures such as this during each week. And of course, you're going to be required to tune in for those. As your syllabus indicates, none of this is live in time. You are able to attend the lecture at your leisure, but it will help, I'm sure, as we move through each assignment to know exactly what I want to be focusing on with those assignments. So stay in touch. And that doesn't mean necessarily emailing me all the time, although you're free to email me at my Husson address. Later on, we'll be either having a conversation by phone or Skype, hopefully at least twice during the course of the semester. And we'll talk about that later as well. You're also going to find that I send out frequent announcements, just keeping you on top of what's going on. Little reminders that maybe you're playing a little too much baseball and not enough time spent reading the stories. If at all possible, I'd love to see you using Google Docs if you're familiar with them. It allows me to be a little more precise when I'm looking at your work, indicating what's working and what isn't. So if you can, please use Google Docs. If not, I'm still able to make notes as you submit your work, but it's more precise if you can use Google Docs. If you do use Google Docs, remember you'll always have to give me permission to edit, or there's no purpose in it. So that's a must. Give me permission to edit if you're using Google Docs. Since this is an online course, I would very much like all of you to fill out your profiles. I've filled out mine, give you a little bit of an idea what I'm about. I would love for all of you to put your pictures in and to fill out your profiles so I can better know where your needs are, just because I know what you like and what you how you think about the future, which I hope to also see a little bit in your first assignment, which is about what literature means to you. That's about it. The course, of course, starts off with your first assignment, which is reading the introduction to the stories, both the Seagull stories, and that is page 9 through 43, Roman numerals in the beginning, and it's very important that you do look at those. It's about 35 pages of reading, but I want you to concentrate especially on the first 10 or 15 pages, but you must read all of it before the end of the week if you're going to seriously begin to reflect on some of the tools that we're going to be using to think about these stories. And these are only stories, and that's what literature means. That's what literature is. It is the stories that we tell to each other and have been telling since the early Greeks. And it defines in so many ways, helps us understand not only the places we live, the families we come from, the societies that we make. It helps us understand ourselves, who we are, what's important to us, what to look out for, what to praise, and what not to praise. There's certainly plenty of that around. It's, of course, a continuation of what we all call here at universities of critical thinking. Thinking for yourself. Making sure you don't believe everything that you're told. And that can stand true as well for stories. Read the stories, Try to understand them on your own, and then reach out on the internet. See what other people have to say about those stories. I do it all the time. And it helps me find out what's important in those stories. The first assignment is one of my favorite, from one of my favorite writers, John Updike, whose books I thoroughly ate up during the 80s and the 90s. And this is one of his most popular short stories. But of all these first short stories, and in fact all of the short stories, I want you to think about three of these tools. Important not only to dramatists, to playwrights, but to short story readers and writers. And they're simple. What do we look for in a story? Well, first we're going to look at character. Who's our protagonist, our main character? And how do we feel about that character? How does that character change over the course of the short story? What is that character trying to do? What is the event that helps that person do what they want to do, or the event that gets in the way of that person doing what they want to do? So think character. But there are other elements equally important in many cases. The second of which is the setting, the place, the environment, the milieu or world in which that character lives. And we want to think about the influence that world has on the character. Think about where you came from, how influential your family was on your upbringing, how influential your schooling was, the state you live in. What about that place helped make you who you are? Well, we have to think in terms of the characters as well. What makes these characters tick? Well, we can find a lot of those answers if we think about where they came from. And the third is action. We think of action as so important when we're talking about plays. And there may be very little action. In which case you might think, well, maybe I should concentrate more on some of the other tools. Maybe it's really more or only about character. Or maybe it's only or more about setting. But the fact is, in most stories that we're going to read, you're going to find that all three of these elements are extremely important. And there's lots to talk about in terms of of character work, of setting, and of action. But just for now, concentrate on those three elements, those three tools, and dig in a little further in that introduction as to how we think about those three. Now, the fourth element is something that's very important to our first story. It's called point of view. We sometimes call it the voice in the story. In other words, who's telling the story? And what difference does it make that this particular character is telling the story? Is that character telling us everything? Is that character lying to us? What does that character want? And why is that character telling the story now? We think of various different kinds of points of view. The one you will probably understand the best is the first person. In other words, the narrator identifies him or herself with the I and tells us as if they're sitting next to us and relaying events that happen to them. And such is the case with A and P, the first story. Now, there are reasons perhaps that that character doesn't tell us certain things. Certainly reasons why that story is being told either right away, or perhaps that story is being told years and years after the events happened. So the first person is very important. When we get to the third person, excuse me. When we get to the third person, it gets a little more confusing. The third person is the he or she, referring to other characters in the story. Third person voice. We have different kinds of third person narrations. We have one which is just the third person who knows everything about the rest of the world that he or she is in, knows the voice or the insides of all of the characters as told by the writer. We call that the omniscient third person narrator. In some cases, the narrator doesn't know everything about the other characters and filters all the information through one or two of the characters. We call that the limited omniscient. Omniscient meaning knowing everything or all. So those are the three more often kinds of points of view that we're going to come across. And so think about that as you're reading A&P and reflecting on it. It's a fun story. It's perhaps a story that some of you have witnessed or even lived, if you're from these parts, and you might have some very strong feelings about it. So let me see. I think that's all I'm going to talk about today. I want you to feel free to email me, to contact me when you're not sure what's going on. If you have suggestions about how I might better run the program, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. I really enjoy teaching. I think the opportunities for online teaching are wide open, and if anybody has any options they might want me to consider, I'd be happy to hear them. So I will look forward to your assignments, which are due tomorrow morning. I've extended that deadline for your responses to the first question, which is about your own impressions of what literature is, what it means to you. They are due tomorrow. So again, welcome to the course. Hello from my home office, and I look forward to getting to know every one of you over the course of the next 3 months or so. So I'll talk to you soon. Signing off.